Wife, Ellie, expressed her displeasure, telling Ryan, "You're acting like an old man again." To which Ryan replied, "You're the one acting like a teenager." The age difference between them was obvious. Ellie was just over 30 and Ryan was 10 years older. They had been married for 5 years now, and recently Ellie had started complaining that life had gotten boring. They were no longer going to interesting places or having fun, as Ellie preferred nightclubs and concert venues, which Ryan didn't like. The age difference was becoming more and more noticeable to the couple. Ellie hadn't worked for several years and instead lived on her husband's income, renting out her apartment. At first, she spent the rent money on herself and large purchases, occasionally turning to Ryan for additional funds. When the last tenants were about to move out, Ryan didn't hesitate to help his wife. However, Ellie began disappearing all day, claiming she was meeting friends for a couple hours and going to a coffee shop. Ryan inquired about her whereabouts when she returned home later than him, to which she replied that she needed to socialize a bit and meet Skylar. Ryan became concerned when he noticed a sudden change in his wife's behavior. In the afternoon, he had to visit a notary in the same neighborhood where his wife rented an apartment. After finishing his business, something compelled him to walk over to her house. He glanced at the windows of Ellie's apartment and noticed that there was a light on in them. That puzzled him, because there shouldn't be any occupants. Curiosity got the better of Ryan, and he decided to go up to the right floor and call his wife to find out her whereabouts. "I'm in my apartment cleaning," she answered. "Great, then I'll be right there," Ryan replied, and without delay knocked on the door. To his surprise, his wife opened the door, and he saw a young man in his early 20s sitting at a table with a book in his hands. The presence of the man's sneakers in the hallway made Ryan suspicious, and he was ready to accuse his wife of wrongdoing. Thinking he had caught her red-handed, the wife quickly cleared the situation up, saying, "This is my brother Oliver. He was evicted from the hostel and asked to stay here until he finds a new place. So I'm not renting the apartment right now." He walked over to Ryan and held out his hand to shake. Ryan hesitated, trying to comprehend the information he had just received. Since he had to get on with his work, he didn't have time to find out everything. So he decided to discuss this unusual situation with his wife later that night over dinner. Ryan began to recount an incident that had happened earlier that day and mentioned the so-called brother. "My husband's suspicions arose when she mentioned a brother I'd never mentioned before," Ellie decided to explain. "We're actually half-brothers, and our father had other children besides me. You know that he and Mom are divorced." Her husband didn't immediately believe her words, though he didn't show it. It was strange that she had never mentioned her brothers until now, and the sudden gift of an entire apartment made Ryan suspicious. He remembered the conversation he'd had with his father-in-law at the wedding, in which they'd exchanged phone numbers. This could be the perfect opportunity for further investigation. He dialed Christian's number, carelessly inquired about his well-being, and mentioned his supposed son in passing. To his surprise, however, his father-in-law expressed bewilderment. "Ellie, I only have one child. You must have misunderstood," he clarified. With that confirmation, Ryan's suspicions turned into certainty. Ellie had indeed lied. The next day, Ryan intentionally left work early to coincide with his wife's departure to a friend's house. He noticed the lights on in her apartment and took the opportunity to address the situation. Ryan greeted Oliver, pretending to have a preliminary conversation with his wife. "Oliver, Ellie told me you're studying to be a doctor," he stated, trying to engage him in a non-existent conversation. Oliver nodded weakly in response. She's a confident girl, so I doubt she'd turn to you for help. However, if you have connections, perhaps you could help her. She has been waiting patiently for months now for a cure for a rather nasty STD. If you know anyone who might be able to help, it wouldn't hurt to ask, the man explained. Oliver's face turned pale and his eyes widened. Don't worry, you won't get sick from the plates. Ryan chuckled, patting the young man on the shoulder. The young man paid no attention to his interlocutor and slowly rose from the table. Without saying a word, he reached for his backpack, which was lying on the couch next to him. I have to go, sorry, the young man muttered under his breath as he hurriedly gathered his few belongings and left the apartment. Ryan sat at the table and laughed loudly. Wow, the receptionist at the nearest clinic is going to be amazed when this guy bursts through the door and demands urgent tests for his mistress. The man grinned, deciding to deal with the situation without any cunning schemes. He gathered all her belongings into bags and put them out in the hallway. When she returned from her friend and entered her house, she didn't immediately realize what was going on. Ryan, are you doing a deep clean or something? She asked, not yet noticing the contents of the bags. Some sort of pre-cleaning, her husband replied. Look, I cleaned your apartment. Now you can share it with 10 needy college students. Although after what happened, I doubt any of them will want to get to know you better. I'd stay away from raucous parties if I were you. The wife stood shocked and at a loss for words. Ellie continued to try to understand Ryan's explanation. When he mentioned that he'd called her father to discuss the situation with Oliver, it was clear to her that her secret affair with her younger lover had been revealed. Ellie had no choice but to move into her modest apartment. However, she quickly realized that without Ryan's financial support, she would no longer be able to pay for her desires. Desperate to find a livelihood, she began looking for a job. Unfortunately, due to her long absence from work, she was unable to find a job quickly. Therefore, she resorted to looking for another sponsor. Despite her best efforts, disappointment befell her in this endeavor as well. Ryan's entourage already knew the real reason for their breakup, and as a consequence, no wealthy man wanted to associate himself with her.